In terms of relationship options, they probably don't have any. Maybe they're not even interested in being promiscuous, but people look at them, and anytime they get themselves something good, people automatically assuming that they fucked a glucose guardian to get there. And it's just this thing where it's like, people prioritize your beauty, people prioritize your looks over everything else, and they assume that you get all of these things that you don't. And the assumption isn't just held by one person or two people.
The royal penis is clean, Your Highness.
Welcome to the Breakdown Podcast, where I talk about love, sex, and relationships from a guy's perspective, as well as a bunch of other guy shit. The man on the mic is a man who believes that jumping to conclusions should be a part of a cardio routine. He is also a man who likes his women the same exact way he likes his yogurt. It is none other than your tall, dark, and mildly handsome man, Sir Denver B. This episode is going to revolve around a lot of understanding. Whether I am trying to understand some issues that women are going through, whether it is me trying to show the understanding that is out there in the world when it comes to certain things, and giving some understanding as to how it is that men can feel about certain things and where our interests might lie, and maybe a couple of tidbits here and there. But all in all, this is still a Friday episode, meaning that I usually like to dive into the wonderful world of X and check out some of the tweets that you guys put out there, some of the stuff that you guys say, some of the opinions that you guys have, and break them down and see if I can make some sense out of them, or I can just clearly show how full of nonsense they are. But it is done without prejudice or hate. It's usually just from a point of learning and understanding, as I had said earlier in the episode. And should you want to contribute to the makings of these episodes, then the drill is pretty simple, almost sounds like a song, and it goes like this. You see that tweet, you like that tweet, you want us to discuss that tweet, you send that tweet. You send it to the DMs of @BagakaTheD, which happens to be my personal X handle, and I will take it from there and handle it accordingly. On Facebook and on IG, if it happens to be a screenshot or a screen grab or ended up on a reel, then the place to send it to is @TheBreaktime_podcast or @TheBreaktime_podcast on IG or on Facebook respectively, and I will take it from there and handle it accordingly. Now, I've got a couple of tweets full of understanding, or misunderstanding if you could call it that, but before I can get into any of that, I first want to talk about how the Nairobi County Assembly recently came up with a proposal for a bill that proposes strict laws on ownership of cats, chicken, and livestock. Which is very, very odd. Now, I am going to give my thoughts on it. Let me just read the article real quick, because it's a bit of a long one. So it says, and I quote, "The Nairobi County Assembly has introduced the Nairobi City County Animal Control and Welfare Bill 2024. This comprehensive bill addresses various aspects of animal care, control, and welfare, aiming to create a harmonious coexistence between residents and animals. The bill, which is set to come into effect upon approval by Governor Johnson Sakaja, is set to undergo public participation on August the 2nd. The bill is divided into several parts, each focusing on specific categories of animals and their welfare requirements. The key sections of the bill include welfare and control of cats and mandatory licensing for cats. One of the central features of the bill is the introduction of mandatory licensing for all cats. Cat owners in Nairobi will now be required to obtain a 200 shilling license fee for each cat that they own. The license must be renewed annually, and the process is designed to be straightforward, with owners needing to provide proof of vaccination and pay a nominal fee. This initiative aims to create a systematic way to monitor and manage the cat population in Nairobi, reducing the incidence of stray and abandoned cats." End quote. Okay, now I know that they focused on cats, but it is supposed to apply to other animals as well. But this is a very interesting bill. Now, normally, people usually look at bills and they're like, is this good for the society or bad for the society? But this one just seems petty as shit. It's like, it's only aimed at hitting the middle class and people who have like proper money, so that they can start paying licenses for owning animals. Yet most of the animals aren't owned by people that make that much money, because, Bosco isn't a common name for nothing. But hey, when you kind of think about it, there is quite a lot that is kind of left up in the air in regards to this entire proposal. But considering the little that I know about it, I at least wanted to make sure that I can streamline some of the issues that we might have here. So for our resident sugar daddies, the cats that they're referring to is not the pussy that you guys are hitting, so y'all don't have to worry about vaccinations and fees, so you can relax. And for the sugar mummies, the chickens, or cocks as some people might call them, do not refer to the Ben 10s that you guys are getting, cock from. So you do not need to worry about any nominal fees or vaccinations and shit. So don't worry, to all of our glucose guardians. You can retain your informal relationships without having to worry about a paper trail or some sort of like fees and like registration and shit. Because I'm sure there's someone that probably looked at this and they were like, oh shit. But with that said, the other affected parties are the hoes. And fortunately for the hoes, regardless of gender, much as you might be using your inner animal to get some of that extra bread, whether it's a woman that's busy giving out that cat to be beaten so that she can get money, whether it's a dude that's giving out, a little bit of cock, or, is letting someone get their dog in them. At the end of the day, this bill doesn't really affect you guys. It actually affects just animals, not y'all. And, you don't have to worry about that shit. Although, now that I have mentioned sex work at this point, honestly, I feel like by the time these guys are getting to domestic animals, they've probably run through all of the places where they can try to extract money from people without complaints, and it's like they're running out of them. And honestly, I think at this rate, them legalizing prostitution, then taxing it, probably would have been a much better approach to give. Now, don't get me wrong, it's not like I'm for taxation of everything. It's just that I tend to think that sex workers wouldn't have a problem. Hell, they might even be happy paying taxes if it means that they can do their work legally and they do not have to fear or just regularly go through the harassment or abuse that the cops usually give them. Because that is a big issue for them. And frankly, they actually generate a pretty good amount of income when you kind of think about it. Like, imagine one person screws like 2-3 dudes charging them a G each. And the dudes are the ones that are paying for the lodging probably, and the condom. Like, that's like a straight $3,000 on a regular. That is like, I don't want to say 90 G's untaxed, but like 60 G's untaxed. Even though you're taking 10,000 out of that from like every single hoe, of which there's probably hundreds of them, over like a monthly period, that's a lot of money for the government. But that's just me that's looking at things a little bit differently. And frankly, I'd probably be more of the idea that we legalize prostitution and tax it, just because, like, imagine having hoes in the front line during these protests. Like, they would be going off. You'd be hearing them busy saying, sisi kama malaya tuko na haki zetu, and they'd be out there just busy talking about how, for them, they can live with a lack of pleasure or a lack of money, but not both of them at the same exact time. Like, imagine you as a hoe having your pussy beat up, having your asshole drilled in by niggas that don't really give too much of a flying fuck about you. Then you give some money to the government, hoping that you'll get better services and HIF and like better roads and shit, so that you won't only have to ride when you're on a dude. Then all of a sudden you're hearing that some politician yanked a bunch of money and decided to go and buy themselves an AP and go to the Maldives for holiday. Like, you'd lose your shit as well. Like, how is it that you're being fucked both ways and you're making less money in the process? Like, that shit don't make sense. And guess what? That's what employed people feel. But anyways, let me not lose my shit, because this isn't a political talk. I have tweets to get into, and we are supposed to try and be understanding. So I am going to try my best and move things on to our very first tweet of this episode, which was put up by a woman who said, and I quote, "Can we finally talk about how being pretty has more cons than pros?" End quote. Okay, now, honestly speaking, pretty privilege does have cons and pros, and people think that it's more pros than cons. But if you are someone that has gotten pretty privilege or is a recipient of pretty privilege, you sort of start to realize that in a lot of cases, it can be more cons than pros. And unfortunately, most people may not understand it, because when you look at the idea of pretty privilege, like, it's a privilege. So it's like you're definitely getting pros there. So there's more doors that will be opened for you. There's more people that will definitely side with you or seek your approval or give you approval by default. And, it seems great. You can get to stuff easier. You may not have to work as hard to get to certain places and into certain positions, not sexually speaking, of course. And, it seems like it's great. Then you suddenly realize that getting the door open for you is not as hard as you actually staying in the room. And most times people usually think that what got you through the door is what's going to keep you in there, but that's usually not the case. And when you're a good looking person, fine, someone can open the door for you because they think you're pretty and they want you there. But even though you might be a professional, even though you might want to do some shit, sometimes people just make it hard for you. And you see this happen quite a lot in the workplace, where it's like, fine, yes, maybe you got the job because the manager saw you during the interview and they were thinking that you're pretty and, they really liked you and, they figured they'd give you the job. But now the manager probably wants to fuck you. Your colleagues probably want to fuck you as well. Maybe the manager might feel intimidated, or your direct supervisor might feel intimidated by you. So they are actively sabotaging your progress and growth. And it's like people think that because you're good looking, the only reason that you're in that job is because you're good looking. So they underestimate you and they possibly even demean you. And as you're doing all of that, you are still expected to climb up the ranks. And while you're busy doing that, sometimes you don't even want to give up the pussy or the dick, or the asshole, depending on what it is someone wants, but the person above you wants that, and they're not going to let you go up, not unless if you give it to them. So they are also actively sabotaging your progress. So you realize that it just becomes a problem for you the entire time. Then there's your social life. The fact that people look at you and they're like, this is a good looking person, shouldn't be a problem for them to bag someone that wants to be with them. Getting a good partner shouldn't be an issue. Or, if they're in the streets, then they're probably breaking hearts. Or, they have this massive list of options, so I probably shouldn't hit on them. Yet in reality, you find that those people actually may have options of people that just want to sleep with them. In terms of relationship options, they probably don't have any. Maybe they're not even interested in being promiscuous, but people look at them, and anytime they get themselves something good, people automatically assuming that they fucked a glucose guardian to get there. And it's just this thing where it's like, people prioritize your beauty, people prioritize your looks over everything else, and they assume that you get all of these things that you don't. And the assumption isn't just held by one person or two people. It's like multitudes of people who think that they're thinking about it as an individual, yet it's this collective belief. And honestly, it is annoying. It's fucking annoying as hell. And it does make the life of someone who's good looking much harder than most people would actually consider or think about, not unless if they actually asked someone who's good looking how it feels or what it's like. Because most times people think that good looking people have it easy because people like the fact that they're good looking. They forget that sometimes shit can actually get harder because you are good looking. But unfortunately, these are things that aren't openly mentioned as much or as publicly. So people are always going to look at people who are good looking and they're gonna be like, what? If they got something that is very premium or very luxurious, there's probably a guy that's paying for it or someone that's paying for it. And if you're going to progress in life, then you're going to have to show how smart you actually are, because most people are gonna look at you and be like, what? This person probably made it to where they are because they are a good-looking individual. But all in all, those are the troubles of some, not all of us, so I am going to leave it at that and move it on to our very next tweet of this episode, which was posted up by a dude, interestingly enough, who said, and I quote, "The way black men abandoned BBL baddies for size 0 models overnight needs to be studied extensively," end quote. To which someone actually responded, and this was a woman, who said they never liked the BBL thing for real and they kept saying it, end quote. Now, okay, first of all, I know that this is an American topic because black men, of course, and BBLs, but much as we don't have that much of an issue with BBLs and, implants here in Kenya, it does speak to something that I do want to talk about. The idea of mainstream beauty and the fact that it's a constantly shifting thing. So when people suddenly start to make life-altering decisions for something that is constantly shifting, it does show how people forget that it is actually something that's constantly shifting. Now, of course, the biggest culprit of this is the BBL and the lipo BBL, and people having like butt implants and just implants in general. That's probably the most, prominent idea of this problem, but it goes beyond it to other things. Like whether it's women starving themselves and becoming anorexic because they wanted to look more like Marilyn Monroe, whether it's women that are trying to go for some version of liposuction so that they can try to look like their favorite influencers, whether it's going for lip fillers and shit, whether it's going for some pill that'll probably make you lose weight at an alarming rate and shit, or, whether it's going to have certain parts of you removed and shit. Like, at the end of it, you have to remember the fact that mainstream beauty is a constantly shifting notion, and the marketing around it, much as it's made to look like that's what is going to look good forever or going to make you look good for good, it's not something that lasts very long. And you actually do kind of look at beauty standards for women over the years, and it's very easy to pick up on that. Even for men, like, you look at how men used to dress back in the day, like in the 60s, and you look at how men dress right now. Like, me and my dad can have a difference in terms of what a good looking suit is supposed to look like, because he was born at a different time and suits used to look a little bit different then, and I'm born at a different time, and how a good tailored suit is supposed to look like now is very different. And that's something that I think people need to start taking more note of, so that they don't start making alterations to their body to affect that. Because you're looking at the babes who went and got BBLs. Some of them died on operating tables trying to get BBLs. Some of them died soon after getting those BBLs, or through some drug use that's supposed to make them look a lot smaller. The guys that have died from abuse of steroids, because guys aren't completely out of this mix. Guys that go and try to make drastic alterations to their diets, to their bodies, so that they can look a certain way. I saw a recent story of a guy who was super skinny as hell and spent tens of thousands of dollars just to get implants for muscles. You're looking at people that are putting in all of this effort into looking a certain way, and sometimes I'm very, very forced to ask, why do this for something that may not be considered as good looking in like 10-15 years? And if you ever want to watch how beauty actually changes over time, then a pretty good place or person to watch is the Kardashians, and more so Kim Kardashian. Like Kim K, if you look at how beauty trends for women have been going for the past maybe 10, 15, almost 17 years, like, you kind of realize that there's a bit of a trend that goes there. Because when Kim was coming into the spotlight from like the sex tape and shit, she had a fairly curvy body, nothing too big and bulging that was out there, and that was the beauty standard at the time. Then she had a much bigger ass, and her tits were really coming out. She had very big assets, and they were sort of proportioned a certain way, and that was the trend at the time. That was when women were busy trying to get BBLs and shit. People were trying to get bigger bums, and they were trying to look thicker, and Kim K at the time was thicker. Then you look at her from like early 2020s and shit, and woman seems to have dropped a lot of weight. Woman seems to have killed off a bunch of whatever it is that they had in her system, and she looks a lot smaller. So you realize that just following in that trend, women have also started to try and get a lot smaller. And it's like, if you're a thick babe, then you were feeling great initially, now you probably don't, or you don't feel as good. If you are a small babe, now it's like this is your time to shine. And unfortunately, because we are a global culture and we are influenced by mainstream media from different sources, we are going to start having more mainstream-ish and more agreed upon ideas of what beauty is supposed to look like. And the truth of it is, it's not like mainstream beauty is everyone's idea of what beautiful is supposed to look like. It's this generalized and often marketed idea of what beautiful is supposed to look like. Yet, in reality, a lot of what people look at as beauty is very subjective. So if you're a babe and you're listening to this, what I'm trying to say is, if you're thick, if you're slim, if you're petite, if you're tall, if you're short, like, however it is you look, provided that you are trying to keep yourself healthy and you are trying to better yourself physically, then for the most part, there's going to be a guy that is going to be interested in how you look. And if you're a guy, the same applies. So you don't have to be a guy that's full of muscle. You don't have to look like a bear. You don't have to be skinny or model-like or anything. At the end of the day, there's going to be someone that's going to be interested in your body type. Either way, I am going to leave it at that and move it on to our final tweet of this episode, which is a bit of a long one and was posted up by some guy who said, and I quote, "When you rewatch Power and analyze, you'll realize why Ghost chose Angela over Tasha. Tasha was a typical black modern woman, attracted to thugs. She was in love with Ghost, the drug dealer. Angela was a feminine woman who was attracted to a good, responsible man. She was in love with James St. Patrick. Tasha had no vision. She couldn't see beyond living in a penthouse. She wanted Ghost to quote-unquote stay in the game. Angela shared in James's vision. She wanted to see him become a successful businessman. She wanted him to have a legacy, and he would have achieved all this if it wasn't for Tasha. She went as far as manipulating his son to murder him, and in the spin-offs living vicariously through her son, who is now a drug dealer, when his father wanted him to have a decent life. This is why, as a man, you should never pick for marriage a woman who doesn't share in your vision. She'll not only wreck you, but your children as well. Learn or perish." End quote. Okay, so I figured I'd do this one as the last one, just, more of on a lighter note, because it's not like everyone's watched Power. But for what it's worth, with my very minimal time going through a couple of the old Power clips, honestly, I don't entirely agree with what dude is saying. On one end, I can see where he's coming from, but on the other end, I think, if you look at it, Ghost or James St. Patrick also as a character wasn't a particularly great one. One, he cheated on his wife, but frankly, if you watch the first episode, if anything, you'll realize that dude is not really feeling his wife by then. Like, the marriage was actually not serving him all that great. He didn't like it all that much. And him finding his first love, just sort of accelerated things. So honestly, if she wasn't there, there's a good chance they might have ended up in divorce or some shit. But with that said, one of the things that I can point out to be actually quite true is Tasha was in love with Ghost, the drug dealer, and Angela was in love with Jamie or James St. Patrick. And, both of those are two different personas for the same exact person. Now, the way I see it, James St. Patrick chose Ghost as, this personality, this person that can get him out of the streets. And he became James St. Patrick so that he could be a good businessman and, sort of transcend the different bits of power and move into politics and shit. Ideally, Angela knew James St. Patrick or Jamie as this really good guy and, not the cover, not this person that he had to be so that he could get out of the streets. So to some degree, you could say that dude looked at it and he was like, this woman sees me for me, not the guy that I'm supposed to be out here in these streets. Which kind of goes back to something that Dave Chappelle said his mom told him back when he was a kid, which was, sometimes you've got to be a lion so that you can be the lamb you truly are. And when you kind of think about it, for us as guys, a lot of times we have to be the lion out here in these streets or some version of a predator or a monster out here in these streets. But in reality, we probably have a soft side that we wish someone could probably just handle and take care of and appreciate. But, for the most part, it's like we're required to be hard all the time. Yet that's not something that we want to do. So from his end, I can probably see that sense. And, if you're a babe, maybe you should listen to your man's vision and see if that's what you align with. But all in all, I could be wrong about this shit. Either way, I want your thoughts on it. The DMs are open. On X, it is at Bagak the D. On Facebook and on IG, it is at the Breaktime Podcast and the Breaktime_podcast, respectively. I'm still looking forward to your votes as I am APVA nominated for the relationship and comedy podcast categories. So I am looking forward to that. Either way, thank you so much for listening, and I will catch you guys on the next break.
But what I believe is that if you put a pastor and a prostitute in one room, one is likely to convert the other.